Welcome to Open Source Spotlight. We invite open source authors and ask them to show the tools they're working on. Today we have Deepyaman. Hi Deepyaman, tell us a few words about yourself and about the tool you want to show us.
Hey, Alexi. My name is Deepyaman. I work at Voltron Data as a software engineer. Uh, in my work there, I'm working on some open source libraries like Ibis and leading development for Ibis ML. But today I'm actually excited to kind of talk about Kedro, which is one of the libraries that really got me very much into open source development. It's a Python-based data pipelining framework.
hmm That's I've actually had no idea that Voltron is working on Kedro too. Like you folks work on quite a lot of things, don't you?
Sorry, I should have probably clarified that. Kedro is something which I started working at actually before Kedro was even
Ah,
open sourced, just as kind of like an external contributor. I was
uh-huh.
working at Quantum Black, the
So
analytics
it's not
company.
related to your company.
It's not directly related. Yeah, it's something which I've just been doing on the side. I am a maintainer of the Kedro project. So Kedro has about 15 people from the Quantum Black side working on it right now, but there are also I think five external people who are part of the technical steering committee. So I'm one of them, and a number of others coming from different companies as well.
That's pretty interesting. Okay, I'm curious to see the demo.
Cool. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So yeah, let me just get started with creating a simple project with Kedro. Um, so I can just so Kedro provides a simple command line. You can see that one of the commands that's there is Kedro new, and that can be used if you're just getting started with Kedro or you want to start up a new project. And that is going to create a project for me. So for this, let's say that I want to call it my open source spotlight project, OSS project. Uh, there's a lot of different options when you're creating it. This is something the team has worked on in, I think, the past year. I'm just going to take the default options, but let's say that I would like an example pipeline to be created. Um, and yeah, well,
And
I've
if
got
we
a
take a step forward, so the main
mhm,
idea is that we have some sort of template, right? It's kind of cookie cutter,
mhm.
or
Yeah, it's yeah, like some people have kind of viewed Kedro as like a cookie cutter data science 2.0. So it does like one of the value propositions of Kedro is it gives you like a consistent way of building up like initial project structure. You can see from that like initial tools option dialog that it is quite configurable. And one of the things that has evolved over the years is that Kedro has become um, less opinionated overall on this. Yes, it'll give you an initial starting point, but if people have their own templates and ways of organizing code that they want to use, Kedro can also adapt to that. But it does have a general structure, and I can go through that a little bit.
yeah, that would be interesting. But I guess when you go through your demo, we will see the
Yeah.
structure, right?
So maybe let me actually kind of go backwards from this, and then we can kind of break down how it's structured. How does it work? So I just switched into this OSS project directory, and let me push this stop of the screen. And if I just do Kedro run right now, we can see the pipeline run. So this is starting with like the space flights project. That's kind of just the default example project for Kedro. And if you go and try out the getting started tutorial, it'll kind of walk you through this, but you can see that it ran like a pipeline. One of the other cool things about Kedro is there's a whole set of like plugins that work with Kedro. Kedro Viz is actually one of those which is maintained by the actually a separate like Kedro Viz team. Um, but with this, I can see what my pipeline looks like. Let me make that a bit bigger. And So we can see, for example, it's a really good way of being able to see what it's actually doing. I've got some shuttles data, companies data, how I can, these are my data sets. I can actually see like a quick, cool preview of the data for data sets which support it. Here you can see this is actually coming from like an Excel file. Similarly, for companies, oops. For companies, I can see that that is coming from a CSV file in this case. This is just for some of the toy examples. Kedro can, of course, connect to like things in cloud storage. I will talk a little bit later about how to things in like databases as well. And you can see also the functions which are kind of operating on these, which are represented as like your nodes in your DAG or directed acyclic graph. So here you can see where that kind of source code is. Actually, I can even look at the code for this specific node if I want. And you can see basically, yeah, the whole flow of what's happening down to doing some data from data engineering to some simple data science modeling, and spitting out some evaluations at the end. So let me actually maybe then step back and see like how does this actually work? How is it structured? So I think we talked briefly about how when you create a project using Kedro New, it's going to give you a project structure. So here I can see that I have a few things. I have my source directory, and in there I have my Python code, including I'll focus mostly on the pipelines. So I can see that I've got, in this case, two pipelines, data processing and data science. And if I look, for example, at data processing and my pipeline code, oops, then you can see that Kedro provides this kind of syntax for creating these pipeline objects, which is basically function taking some inputs, some outputs, and putting all of these together to create this graph. You will also see that, for example, here we have pre-processed companies as an output, pre-processed companies as an input here, and that's how like Kedro figures out what that DAG looks like. And the logic for these different functions which are being run will be in the corresponding nodes. Again, of course, you can choose, it's just Python code. You can organize it as you want. But for example, we can see the pre-process companies code or the pre-process shuttles code. The other, and there's like a lot more than we can really go into depth here, but the other kind of big point which I want to talk about was the fact that Kedro has a data catalog concept. So you saw before on those in the pipeline definition that it was referencing these names. And so Kedro actually provides this abstraction between where you're defining your like code logic and where you're going to be like what's your kind of IO, so and where your data is stored. So for example, here, my pre-processed companies, it's referencing a particular data set. You can see that it's writing out to a Parquet file. In this case, it's using this data set implementation called pandas.parquet dataset, which is basically a wrapper around pandas for reading and writing Parquet. And Kedro datasets has this like kind of big library of different and data sets that you can use. You can see here's like a pickle one. I can show some other ones later, as well as like users can always create their own. Maybe just as like another example. So this was a very simple space flights demo, which is there kind of from the default. But I've also just kind of pulled up another project. I mentioned I work also on things like Ibis and Ibis ML in my, I guess, full-time job. And so here, for example, just to kind of give an example of what else you can do, I've created a similar project. This is for flight delay prediction, but you can see that I've defined like my own Ibis table data set, and just something like I could build and read and write Ibis tables, in this case, coming from like a DuckDB file. And the interface with which you would run this would basically be the Same thing. You can just do a Kedro run. I could again do like a Kedro visit if I wanted to. But you can see in this case, instead of reading, writing, if you remember from the last time we had from like Excel data sets, here you have reading and writing from table data sets. And this time it's like actually in DuckDB tables. That Kedro is actually something you can use even like, let's say that you want a Pythonic alternative to doing something that you might do with DBT or SQL mesh. It provides a very similar kind of workflow, but you can do it kind of in a Python first way and leverage whatever libraries you need that are available in Python to do those workflows. And one of the advantages, Python's great for your data science aspects as well. So you can do your model training, evaluation, all of those things rather than necessarily using two frameworks.
Yeah, that's quite nice. So I'm just wondering what's the main advantage of Kedro? Yes, we can have this initial structure, but also from what I understand, it also gives us this declarative, structured way of defining the pipeline and understanding what are the steps of this pipeline. And then plus on top, we have this good visualization, right? Is
Yeah.
this the main idea behind Kedro?
Yeah, I think that covers a lot of the kind of main points very well. I think if I was even to go one level higher, the initial kind of focus of Kedro is to kind of bring some of the software engineering principles to data engineering and data science code. So you can still see probably 80-90% of the data science projects that you'll see out there basically maybe some code in Jupyter notebooks or orchestrated Jupyter notebooks or something like that. And Kedro helps you easily bring some of the advantages of doing these kind of complex workflows, but from a Python perspective. Some of the things that I didn't kind of show is like, okay, how I mean, it's very easy to unit test. Of course, your code because it's there in
I think
Python and
I've seen PyTest when you initialized the project. So there
yeah.
was linter, rough, then the second was the testing PyTest, right?
Mhm.
And then a bunch of other things.
Yep. Yeah, so some of the other things being like, okay, creating an automated way of doing linting, or even things for like being able to kind of build docs for your project because it's building your project in a kind of standardized Python package way. So each Kedro project is actually also a Python package. So you can then package it up. You can generate your docs for the package and things like that. And so this being kind of going back to my like earlier experience when I used to work as a like client facing data engineer, machine learning engineer at Quantum Black, and we go into like so many different companies where you don't necessarily have especially 5-6 years ago some of these like kind of software engineering best practices, especially in your data science teams. It was kind of a way to be like, here's something that gets you started very easily. You can of course learn more about each of these things and you could figure out how to configure all of that yourself. But at least we're going to provide a way to kind of and a common structure to kind of build your code with nice functions that are like kind of grouped together, packaging, testing, and so on. And one of the so that's kind of that getting started thing. I do also want to think Kedro is very vast in terms of then like what you can do with it. Some of the small things are, for example, you will see here that it's using, let's say, synchronous mode using a sequential runner, right? So each of these things also customizable. Like you can run asynchronous. So you can use a different runner, like a thread runner, parallel runner, in order to like kind of um, process things in process your nodes in parallel. You can write your own custom runners. Like one of the things I've done worked with somebody a few years ago was around building a Dask runner where you can dispatch your nodes to different as a different tasks in a Dask cluster. Kedro also really focuses on integrating with the broader ecosystem. One of the really great things is Kedro's user community. One of the people who's actually he's also part of the technical steering committee now, but led a lot of the work in building in plugins. So Kedro has this, so things like Kedro Viz, but other plugins as well integrate through this pluggy based plugin system. So building deployment plugins for things like Vertex AI and Kubeflow and things like that, where you can have your Kedro code, but then you can have that properly mapped to various orchestrators if you're looking for that production deployment.
What you're
Uh,
saying is that we can take our Kedro pipeline and then just run it as a kubeflow pipeline.
yeah, it can be yeah, essentially like you can translate or the plugin can translate automatically for you your pipeline definition and dispatch it as something like Kubeflow
Uh-huh.
pipeline.
Yeah, that's interesting because I had a question and you partly answered that. So the question was that the word pipeline is kind of overloaded.
Mhm.
Like you have these data engineering pipelines, which is like, you use Airflow or Prefect or Duckster. That's one sort of
Mhm.
the pipeline. On the other side of the spectrum, you have scikit-learn pipelines, which
Yes.
is they have nothing to do with these data engineering pipelines. So this is more like an abstraction of like the steps you take in order to train a model, uh, right? And so from what I understood so far, before you said that you can run Kedro as a kubeflow pipeline, that Kedro sits somewhere between this data engineering and scikit-learn. So this is
Yeah.
data engineering is like, it's there are many things happening before you can train your machine learning model, right? And this is like you prepare the data set somehow, I don't know, you might need to run some Spark stuff, whatnot, but then your data is prepared and then you run Kedra to actually train the model. And then inside Kedra, maybe one of the steps could be using scikit-learn pipelines.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think you largely covered it. In terms of kind of where Kedro fits, Kedro is basically providing is just building a DAG of Python logic, and and Kedro is not an orchestrator, similar to in the same vein as like something like Prefect or Dagster or Airflow is. Actually, like that's one of those places where similar to like Kedro Kubeflow, you have like Kedro Airflow plugin or and things like that. Actually, one of the terms which I find is actually quite useful for this is like Kedro is a and this is from like another product that Kedro is like kind of like a micro pipelining framework in that you can think of your bigger pipeline as being something like your Airflow pipeline and or like your Dagster pipeline and a lot of these or Kubeflow, a lot of these things are going to basically be like working at a different level, like you said, pipeline is very overloaded. So those are usually tasks, and oftentimes each task is running within a container.
Mhm.
However, you can think that, for example, here, or let me actually kind of look at, since this is operating database tables, uh, it's a bit of a different like paradigm, but here we can see that I am doing some basic data processing and creating like a model input table from a few Parquet files. Probably each of these functions should not be its own, should not be running in
Right.
its own
Yeah.
container. There's no need for that. But but you still want to be able to, as you build up a lot of logic, you want to be able to organize that rather than just having a
Yeah.
massive
But it
code. So you can run one of these
typically
pipelines.
typically you still run it within the same process, right? Or
Um,
depends.
like the full Kedro project.
Yeah, like right now you did Kedro run and then like was it just one Python process or you created a because like I'm wondering maybe it's something similar to Make, right? But in Make every step would be this kind of separate process.
Mhm. So it depends. With this Kedro, just like kind of default sequential runner and on like the basic project, yes, it's all running within one Python process. Um, that's where like some of these plugins like do play in that you can essentially map different pipelines or nodes to run on certain like as a node within an orchestrator. I'm actually not super familiar with, like, for example, right now how the Kedro Kubeflow or Kedro Vertex AI plugin works. I haven't really kept up with it as much. But when I've done some of this work myself, I would map one of these modular pipelines. So in this case, it's containing the data processing pipeline and the data science pipeline, I believe, and map each of those to one node in the broader orchestrator automatically. In which case, then it's running on essentially two separate containers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the demo. I have a few questions. So one question I typically ask is how many people are working on this, but I think you answered at the beginning. Was it 15, right?
Yeah, so it's 15 people who are who are full-time employed uh, from Quantum Black, but then there's also 5 people who are parts of the technical steering committee right now who are not with Quantum Black and work at a number of other companies. In addition to that, I mean, Kedro has a very vibrant user community. And there are a lot of people who've contributed to Kedro, especially like contributing like custom data set implementations and things like that. Actually,
Like
one of the things that
Ibis, right?
sorry.
Ibis. Like,
Yeah, I'd say that that is actually one which I've uh built as well as actually somebody built a version of that. Another contributor from outside the Kedro team had built that initially, and then I kind of helped
mhm,
productionize it in and get that included eventually into Kedro datasets. One of the things I actually wanted to highlight, just realizing it's September, is so Kedro was a really great way for me to get started with open source development. Kedro does the Kedro team does actually participate in Hacktoberfest every year and make sure to kind of like curate a lot of kind of nice getting started issues if anybody's kind of looking to get started. The team is actually one of the things I've found really nice is that the team is very helpful for people who want to kind of get started on their open source journey or contributing to Kedro.
yeah, awesome. So this year, Oktoberfest, you're taking part too.
Yep.
That's awesome. And so for people, next question, and you answered that already. I don't know how you do this. So my next question is how people can contribute. So the easiest way is just wait a little bit, then it's October, then there's Oktoberfest, you just join, and then there are people who help you make the first contribution. Outside of
Yeah.
Oktoberfest, how somebody can get started and contribute to Kedro?
Yeah, okay. I was actually just about to give an example of that. So I think the best way of getting started contributing with Kedro is when you start using Kedro and you run into some feature you wish you had, or you want like a new data set that doesn't exist. So there's actually like a example I personally had with somebody who reached out quite recently because they are using that Ibis table data set, which I'd put up a pretty minimal example, and they needed the ability um, to do like inserts and upserts into tables. And they're like, well, I also want to get started working on we're like contributing to open source. And it's like, well, this is a great way. You can figure out how to add that functionality. Here's kind of the lines of code in the data set. And we can definitely like help guide people in making some of their first contributions that way, especially if it's something which is the best problems you solve are the ones which are bothering you to begin with, rather than just finding a random uh,
Hmm.
project and being like, let me start contributing, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's probably the easiest way. Another way which like a lot of people contribute is through the creation of data sets. So of course, like here we see like things like CSV files, Parquet files. I mean, that's very I mean, that's very standard. Maybe I can actually pull this up. Um, so if I go here to Kedro data sets, um, you'll see that there's a huge range of, let me make this bigger. you'll see that there's a huge range of data sets available, including things like a
Well,
GeoPanda data set or a Hugging Face data set or like graph data. And there's actually now Kedro has this split between like experimental ones. You see like Lang chain data sets and like GeoTIFF data sets and things like that. So most of these actually come from users who have who want to be able to leverage it, kind of the core Kedro, be able to organize your Python data processing, data science code, but they have different sorts of data that they're working with. And one of the nice things about Kedro is it's very easy to get started, define your own custom data set, and you can then share that with the world for people to leverage if they're working on similar sorts of data as you.
yeah, amazing. And is there a list of issues for data sets? So for example, like I just want to contribute to an open source project. I
Mhm.
don't have yet a project to work on to use Kedro with.
Yeah. So if you so Kedro project all falls under the Kedro org. Should have probably actually mentioned that Kedro is so you'll find that Kedro is not under the McKinsey or Quantum Black org. It is kind of an independently governed project, which is actually part of the Linux Foundation AI and data. And you'll see that each of the repositories here, and under there, one of them you'll see is Kedro plugins. So Kedro plugins is a monorepo, which includes Kedro datasets. And here you'll see all of the like kind of dataset implementations under here. There are a lot of issues here, including a lot of these are for enhancements on existing data sets. So for example, you can see this is what I was mentioning around support for inserting data and upserting data into Ibis table data set. But you'll see that, for example, I haven't actually taken a look at this, but somebody has raised an issue for they want an external table data set for Databricks. Most likely, this could be something that somebody wants to go ahead and implement. Especially as Hacktoberfest rolls around, I think you'll see more of these marked with things like good first issue and things like that. I think that there might be, yeah, there's not a ton of them marked right now, but you'll see more of these pop up because I think the team will triage that. If you do also want to get started, let's say on the Kedro side, then there is also, whoops, not zero, that. You'll also see like some with a good first issue, but you'll see a lot more popping
Mm.
up.
In two
Um,
weeks, yes.
yeah, probably. The other thing is that Kedro does have quite nice documentation, award-winning documentation, in fact, and has invested quite a bit on there. And documentation PRs are, of course, like I'd say a great way to get started is if you are going through a tutorial or going through some other like guide and you find an issue in the documentation, documentation PRs are also always welcome.
Mhm. And in my experience, this is one of the easiest ways of
Yeah.
contributing to an open source project because uh, like it's less maybe strict when it comes to accepting
Mhm.
a PR or documentation. Then like this is one of my first contributions was to scikit-learn
Mhm.
documentation. Yeah, so like I saw something there and my PR was accepted like in an hour because it's like they
Nice.
just looks good to me, accept, boom. While for code, you need to actually run it, make sure like not only do code review, but also run it against all the tests and multiple people need to look at this and then it takes longer. Yeah, thanks. Last question is, do you have any advice for anyone who is watching this?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say that one thing, and I think you've kind of covered this in your answer just now, is I personally found contributing to open source is like a is like a very rewarding journey. And the main thing to do is just to kind of get started, get started small. And don't try to be like, okay, my first thing is going to be I'm going to rewrite the way the data catalog works for Kedro or something like that. Just get your feet wet, and I think it helps build up the confidence, build up your links with the community, and people are always happy to see like recurring contributors and not people who are just kind of driving by and throwing in a PR once, even though that's also fine. And really who are people who are interested in like using, engaging, and kind of making it a better product. And I think open source is very much a community thing first and foremost, and um, always great to see more and more people becoming part of that.
Yeah, amazing. So please, everyone, go and contribute to open source. That's rewarding and amazing. And do not forget to give Kedro a star. Deepyaman, thanks a lot for doing the demo and for answering all my questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Alexi, for having me.
Yeah, bye everyone.